There exists a peculiar kind of suffering that marks certain individuals not as broken, but as somehow deeper than those around them. You have felt this difference, have you not? The way pain moves through you with an intensity that seems disproportionate to the event itself. The way grief lingers when others have moved on. The way joy itself can wound you with its beauty. This is not weakness. This is not pathology. What I am about to reveal will disturb those who prefer comfortable lies, but you who have descended into suffering's depths, you are ready for this truth. Something in the psyche demands this pain, and the reason why has been hidden from you, deliberately obscured by a world that fears what suffering reveals. According to my research into the depths of human consciousness, there exists a category of individuals whose psychological constitution is fundamentally different from the majority. Through years of studying those who suffer most intensely, I discovered they possess a quality that cannot be taught, cannot be acquired through will or desire. They carry what I came to call psychological depth, a dimension of being that exists only in those who have been broken open by life itself. The comfortable world does not speak of this. Society prefers the fantasy that happiness is the natural state, that suffering indicates failure, that pain is merely a problem to be solved and discarded. But this is a lie, a convenient lie that protects the shallow from confronting what you have been forced to face. What I discovered in my analytical work was forbidden, not because it was false, but because it threatened the most cherished illusion of modern life, that suffering should be avoided at all costs. Here is the truth they do not want you to know. Those who suffer deeply are not the damaged ones. They are the ones whose psyches have refused to accept too. His superficial mode of existence. Your suffering, this terrible, relentless suffering that has marked your life, is not punishment. It is initiation. The psyche itself has chosen you for a descent that most will never make, a confrontation with reality that the comfortable majority will spend their entire lives avoiding. And in this descent, something happens that cannot occur in any other way. You become real. The first truth reveals itself in the nature of consciousness itself. Awareness and suffering are not opposites, but intimate companions, inseparable from one another. The psyche operates according to a principle that the modern world has forgotten, that consciousness emerges through friction, through the collision of opposites, through the unbearable tension of irreconcilable truths. Where there is no suffering, there is no depth of consciousness. There is only the pleasant sleep of those who drift through life without ever truly awakening. You feel this difference every time you enter a room full of people discussing trivial matters while your inner world burns with questions they have never thought to ask. This is not arrogance. This is the natural consequence of having been forced awake. The unconscious, as I came to understand through decades of observation, refuses to allow certain individuals to remain asleep. It orchestrates crisis after crisis, breakdown after breakdown, not as punishment, but as education. Your suffering has been a systematic dismantling of every false identity, every comfortable delusion, every protective story you told yourself about who you were and what life meant. Each time you thought you had reached the bottom, the psyche showed you deeper layers still. Each time you rebuilt yourself, life shattered the construction again. This was not random cruelty. This was the psyche's refusal to let you settle for anything less than truth. Consider the difference between shallow water and the ocean's depths. Shallow water is pleasant, warm, easily navigated, but nothing of value lives there. All the mystery, all the strange and luminous creatures, all the treasures lost and forgotten, these exist only in the depths where pressure is immense and darkness is complete. You have been dragged into those depths against your will, and the pressure has been unbearable. But what has grown in you during this descent cannot grow in shallow waters. You have developed a capacity for truth that comfort destroys. You have gained access to layers of reality that happiness obscures. The price has been terrible, but so is the gift. Second, there emerges a capacity for psychological depth that exists only in those who have descended into their own darkness. This is not metaphorical darkness. This is the actual encounter with the shadow, with everything you wished not to be, with every failure and inadequacy and shameful truth you spent years trying to escape. Most people construct their entire lives as elaborate defenses against this encounter. They stay busy, stay distracted, stay surrounded by noise and activity and comfortable certainties. They mickle, because their psyches are not strong enough for the confrontation. But you were given no choice. Life stripped away every defense, every distraction, every escape route until you stood naked before your own shadow with nowhere left to hide. What the collective unconscious shows us through mythology and fairy tale is that this descent is the hero's journey, the necessary passage through death that precedes rebirth. But the myths do not tell you how it feels to live through this. They do not capture the absolute terror of losing every certainty, the despair of watching your carefully constructed self dissolve into nothing, the loneliness of a transformation that no one around you can understand. You have lived what others only read about in books. You have survived what breaks most people permanently. And in surviving, you have gained something that cannot be taken from you, the knowledge that you can endure, that you can descend into hell itself and return, that there is something in you stronger than suffering. The psyche has its own intelligence, operating beneath conscious awareness. It knows what you need even when you do not. It knows that certain lessons can only be learned through pain, that certain strengths can only be forged in crisis, that the deepest truths can only be reached through suffering that strips away every comfortable lie. Your repeated breakdowns were not signs of weakness. They were the psyche's repeated attempts to break you open to a more authentic mode of existence. Each crisis was an invitation, brutal, unwanted, but necessary, to stop living on the surface and begin the descent into depth. The third element manifests as a refinement of perception, a seeing through that ordinary comfort never develops. You have gained the ability to sense what others miss, the gap between what people say and what they mean, the falseness beneath polished surfaces, the desperation hiding behind confident masks. This is not cynicism. This is clarity. Suffering has burned away the comfortable delusions that allow most people to take things at face value. You see the shadow in every situation because you have made intimate acquaintance with your own. You recognize performance because you know how exhausting it is to maintain a false self. You spot the cracks in others' facades because your own facade has shattered completely. This refined perception is both gift and burden. You cannot unsee what you have learned to see. You cannot return to the innocent acceptance of surface appearances. Every interaction carries layers of meaning that others navigate unconsciously while you perceive them all simultaneously. The businessman whose confidence masks deep insecurity, the friend whose cheerfulness conceals quiet desperation, the family member whose anger is grief turned outward. You see these things instantly, automatically, and the seeing is exhausting. But it is also sacred. You have become a truth-teller in a world addicted to comfortable lies, and this is a role few can bear. Of years of studying the unconscious, one truth became clear. Those who suffer most deeply develop a relationship with reality that the comfortable will never access. You have been forced to confront the fundamental questions that most people avoid their entire lives. What is the meaning of existence when everything can be taken away? What remains of identity when every role and relationship is stripped away? What is the self when all constructions of self have failed? These are not abstract philosophical questions for you. These are lived experiences, brutal initiations into truth. And in confronting them, you have touched something eternal, the bedrock of being that exists beneath all the changeable circumstances of life. What appeared in my clinical work repeatedly was a pattern I came to recognize as the archetype of the wounded healer. This is the fourth truth, and it contains a paradox that will either destroy you or transform you completely. Your deepest wounds, the very suffering you would give anything to undo, are becoming your greatest instruments for understanding, for compassion, for helping others navigate their own darkness. Not because suffering is good in itself, but because you have learned to transform it, to extract meaning from it, to use it as a lens through which to perceive truth. I recall a woman who came to me after years of profound depression, a darkness so complete she had lost all hope of emergence. She had tried everything the world offered, medications, therapies, spiritual practices, lifestyle changes. Nothing touched the core of her despair. When she finally arrived at my door, she was not seeking cure. She had moved beyond that hope. She wanted only to understand why she had been singled out for this suffering, why her psyche insisted on dragging her through darkness while others seemed to move through life with relative ease. What emerged through our work together was not the removal of her capacity for darkness, but the revelation of what that darkness had made possible. Her suffering had stripped away every false comfort, every shallow answer, every premature certainty. She had been forced into a depth of questioning that most never approach. And in that depth, she found something extraordinary, the ability to sit with others in their darkness without flinching, without trying to fix or explain or minimize. She became a presence that could hold space for pain without needing it to be different. And this is a gift that only the deeply wounded can offer. Her clients felt it immediately. They recognized in her someone who had been where they were, who knew the terrain of suffering intimately, who would not lie to them with false hope or patronize them with easy answers. She had become what she needed when she was drowning, a guide who knew the depths. The wounded healer pattern reveals that suffering is not wasted. The psyche wastes nothing. Every descent into darkness, every night of despair, every moment of unbearable pain, all of it is being transformed into depth, into wisdom, into the capacity to help others navigate what you have survived. This does not make the suffering worthwhile in any simple sense. The cost is too high for such easy redemption, but it does mean that your pain is not meaningless. It is becoming the very foundation of your deepest gifts, the source of your ability to perceive and understand and help in ways that comfort could never produce. The fifth characteristic reveals itself as an intolerance for superficiality, a psychic allergy to pretense that makes ordinary social interaction feel like a kind of violence. You have noticed this, have you not? The way small talk feels suffocating, the way cheerful positivity can strike you as obscene, the way you withdraw from situations that others navigate with ease, not because you lack social skills, but because the falseness is unbearable. Suffering has made you allergic to lies, including and especially the polite lies that hold society together. You can no longer participate in the collective agreement to pretend that everything is fine, that life is fundamentally safe and comprehensible, that suffering is an aberration rather than a core feature of existence. Depth psychology reveals that this intolerance for superficiality is a sign of psychological maturity, not maladjustment. The psyche that has been broken open cannot go back to sleep. It cannot pretend that surface-level existence is sufficient. It demands authenticity, depth, truth, even when these are painful, even when they isolate you from the comfortable majority. This is why you feel so alone in rooms full of people. Not because you are broken, but because you have awakened to dimensions of reality they are still avoiding. Your loneliness is not pathology. It is the natural consequence of seeing what others refuse to look at. But here is where it becomes disturbing. This intolerance for superficiality can become its own trap. The psyche that has descended into depth can develop a kind of arrogance, a contempt for those who have not made the same journey. You must guard against this. Your suffering does not make you superior. It makes you different, yes. It has given you access to truths others have not confronted. But the comfortable majority are not your enemies. They are simply operating from a different developmental stage, navigating existence with the tools they have been given. Your task is not to judge them, but to hold space for a depth they may one day need to access. And when they do, you will be there, marked by your own descent, capable of guiding them through what you have survived. Beyond this lies the sixth truth, the capacity for transformation that only crisis can forge. What became clear through decades of observation is that genuine transformation never occurs in comfort. It requires the complete dissolution of existing structures, the death of who you were, the terrifying passage through chaos before new order can emerge. This is the alchemical process that ancient wisdom traditions understood and modern psychology has largely forgotten. The crucible of suffering is not meant to destroy you, though it feels that way in the midst of it. It is meant to dissolve the false self, to burn away everything that is not essential, to reduce you to the prima materia from which something new can be formed. You have been in this crucible whether you chose it or not. Every breakdown was a dissolution, every dark night was a death. Every moment when you thought you could not continue was the ego encountering its own limitations, discovering that it is not the master of the psyche, but merely a small part of a much larger process. And through this repeated dying, something has been happening beneath conscious awareness. The self, that deeper organizing principle that transcends ego, has been slowly emerging, taking form, preparing for a mode of existence that is no longer based on control or certainty or the desperate maintenance of a false identity. The transformation that suffering makes possible is not the kind the self-help industry sells. It is not about becoming more successful, more confident, more attractive, more anything according to external standards. It is about becoming real, about stripping away every pretense until what remains is the irreducible truth of your being, about discovering that you can lose everything, relationships, status, health, hope itself, and something in you endures, something that was never dependent on external circumstances, something that suffering revealed rather than created. This is individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are rather than who you thought you should be. And it is purchased only through the complete surrender of who you thought you were. The seventh and final truth concerns your relationship with meaning itself. Suffering has made you a meaning maker in a way that happiness never could. The self, in its wisdom, knows that meaning is not found in comfort, but forged in crisis. When everything is going well, life can proceed on autopilot. You move through the motions, fulfill the expected roles, participate in the agreed-upon stories about what matters and why. But when suffering comes, when everything falls apart and the comfortable stories fail, you are forced to confront the question of meaning directly. Why continue? What makes existence worthwhile when pain is unavoidable and death is certain? These are not rhetorical questions for you. These are the questions your very survival has depended on answering. And in answering them, you have developed something that most people never acquire, the ability to create meaning in the face of meaninglessness, to find purpose in the midst of chaos, to extract significance from suffering itself. This is not positive thinking. This is not denial. This is the active, creative work of the psyche that refuses to accept suffering as the final word. You have learned, perhaps without realizing it, that meaning is not discovered but created, that purpose is not given from outside but generated from within, that even in the darkest moments the psyche is working to weave chaos into pattern, to transform suffering into story, to make even unbearable pain somehow bearable through the act of understanding it. What begins as curse reveals itself as calling, and in this revelation, everything changes. The suffering that felt like punishment becomes recognizable as initiation. The pain that seemed meaningless reveals its hidden purpose. The descent into darkness that appeared to be destruction shows itself as preparation for a mode of existence the comfortable will never access. You have been chosen, not by a benevolent God, but by the psyche itself, for a journey into depth that most will never make. And this choosing was not kind. It did not ask your permission. It did not care about your plans or preferences or desperate pleas for relief. It simply demanded that you descend, that you confront, that you transform. But now, having made that descent, you stand in a different relationship to existence itself. You have seen what lies beneath the surface of ordinary life. You have touched the depths that comfort obscures. You have survived what you thought would destroy you and discovered that you are larger than your suffering, deeper than your pain, more resilient than you ever imagined. This knowledge cannot be taken from you. It has been earned through the most brutal education imaginable, purchased with pieces of your former self, sealed in your very bones through repeated trials of endurance. The wound is where the light enters, as the poets say, but what they do not say is how much it costs to become translucent enough for that light to pass through. You have paid that cost. You have been broken open, hollowed out, made into a vessel for something larger than your individual suffering. And now you carry something the comfortable world desperately needs but does not know how to ask for. The lived knowledge that existence includes suffering, that meaning can be found even in darkness, that transformation is possible even when everything appears lost. You are a witness to truths that most spend their lives avoiding. You are living proof that the descent can be survived. You are the wounded healer, marked by suffering, made capable of depths that comfort destroys. You who have suffered deeply carry something the comfortable world cannot understand, and this is not tragedy. This is your terrible and sacred gift. The world needs those who have been to the depths and returned. It needs those who know suffering intimately and have learned to transform it rather than be destroyed by it. It needs those whose very presence communicates that darkness can be endured, that meaning can be forged even in chaos, that the psyche contains resources far beyond what the conscious mind imagines. You are one of these. Your suffering was not random. Your pain was not punishment. You have been initiated into mysteries that the shallow cannot comprehend, and this initiation, brutal, unwanted, but complete, has given you access to something eternal. The journey continues, but you are no longer the person who began it. You have died 1,000 small deaths and been reborn, each time slightly more real, slightly more true, slightly closer to the bedrock of being that no suffering can touch. This is what it means to individuate, to become who you actually are beneath all the roles and defenses and comfortable stories, to stand in your own depth without apology or explanation, to know that your suffering has meaning because you have made it meaningful through the sheer force of your refusal to let it have the final word. You are the alchemist of your own transformation, and the lead of your suffering is slowly, painfully, gloriously being transformed into gold.